Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming, and obviously I am back again with another Eve Echoes video on the final build series. Now as you can see, this video takes on the ultimate PvP ship, the Cruor. Now there is one thing I want to note about the ship before we even get into any of the heavy parts. This ship favors PvP. There is no way that the ship ever will favor PvE more than it does PvP. It has the biggest drain when it comes to Nosferatu for this particular class of vessel. It has the best effect against any ship that's within the same class. It is 100% immune to Nosferatu. The only thing you can do to this ship is you can actually neutralize it, but obviously that means you need a bigger ship and you need to waste your power. Considering that the ship can keep using the Nosferatu against you even when you neutralize it, that means that you are at a disadvantage against this particular ship. So please be very careful about how you plan to use it. Now in PvE, the effect of a Nosferatu is not multiply extended. It is just a one-way extension to it. It gives you more power. So it only extends your ability to stay durable in fights, and considering that these are armor tanking vessels, you're going to see that my builds are going to be slightly not to scrap. These are very high demand power usage vessels, so you're going to see that the format in which I'm playing the ship isn't going to be what you would ideally want to play it if you're playing it in PvP. The ship is going to go on the close range assault. It is going to be heavy in terms of power grid. It is going to be heavy in terms of the amount of Nosferatu it has, because the only thing on the ship that I would overload is Nosferatu. There is nothing else that is needed for the ship. If this ship has enough power, it can overload itself 100 times over, and there isn't a thing you can do to stop it. These vampire class ships are really good at that particular role when it comes to battle. Now obviously, as I'm saying, it has a vampire type role. It eats capacitor. That means these ships work well with overloading to keep up their shield. So obviously if you can, for example with the higher class faction ships, when it comes to the same group, you always will try and overload them in terms of the shield regeneration. However, on the small class, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. As you can see, we only have an 88 megawatt power grid, and when you add in the fact that it uses lasers, 88 megawatts becomes something like 40. When you add in the addition from all of your bonuses, you'll end up somewhere near 120, possibly for its complete grid. If you decide to change up one or two items on the ship, yeah, it is a possibility that you're really going to have a beast of a ship by extending the power grid on it instead of extending its actual capacitor. And when you extend power grid on the ship, the next thing that you can do is blast away with your Nosferatu. But that is a whole other situation, and I will go through all of it as we discuss this build. Okay, so number one, the roll bonus is minus 100% energy Nosferatu overload penalty. So there is no penalty from Nosferatu. This ship is almost unaffected by Nosferatu because none of its effects really go through to this vessel. Yes, you can drain it with the Nosferatu, but its drain in terms of class is faster and harder. Alright, let's look at advanced electronic warfare. For each level, you gain plus 15% Nosferatu efficiency. Now 15 times 5 is no small feat. That's 75% efficiency. Already, you know, even if somebody has Falkris or Freklus gear on their ship, they aren't going to be able to match the ship with the Freklus set. They have 75% higher pull. That means immediately they're going to pull that much of energy from you. 75% to even if it is 100 per tick is something which you do not want to fight against. Alright, the next thing is neutralize the strength. So if you wanted to be a little bit more aggressive with it and you wanted to use neutralizers, you get a 75% strength to the neutralizer. So for your cost in energy, you're getting 75% extra. That makes this one of the best PvP usage vessels. You can use it to knock out heavy defenses for other teams. So if somebody is trying to use logistics against the ship, they generally will lose. And it is quite a simple reason why you will lose against the ship. this ship has the ability to knock out your capacitor. And if your capacitor goes down, that means your ability to enhance your resistance is down as well. It also means you're going to lose power to weapon systems that require power, and that gives it a massive edge. Plus, this ship will keep up its power much longer than your ship would, so that is something to note. The last thing is it gives you a plus 20% stasis Weber fire optimal range. This means that any Weber fire that you use on the ship has a 100% extension of range. So while you're using this here, if say for example you're using a Weber fire with a 16 kilometer range, you have a 32 kilometer range on this vessel. That means if you pair the ship up correctly with any type of weapon system, you literally will gain the edge. Now, when it comes to the ship, as I said, overloading Nosferatu in the middle slot is one of the best ways to go with it. But I will give you a secondary option on what I call the Tackle Devil. The Tackle Devil is because it has the ability to hold ships in place from a much greater distance than any other ship. And obviously, if you up this class 1 over and you move up to the faction cruiser, you all of a sudden have a much more powerful ship with that same type of range bonus. And if you apply it correctly, you can use it with that speed bonus from that particular ship to actually slow everything down. Now, I don't remember all of my ships by name within each of the factions. I can't even remember these ships' names off by heart, but I hope that I do get it through correctly. Okay, so the next thing is for the Advanced Frigate Command. Plus 25% laser damage. That's a 100% boost to any weapon that you get. So instantly you double any laser weapon that you're going to put on the ship. That tells you can really apply damage. Remember, you can zap their capacitor dead, plus you can apply double damage to them. That means if you fight anybody else in the same class as you, you just about guaranteed a win when it comes to PvP. In PvE, it means this ship will eliminate all small vessels very easily. You will be doubling their output in terms of firepower, and you will also have that tracking speed bonus of 37.5%. It may not be that huge, but with everything applied, you really do have the combat edge with this vessel. Okay, so overall stats, 4,870 overall defense. Adding this to all of your engineering, all of the research into frigates, you're going to get a big bonus to this buff. Now, this is something I haven't explained before, but with this buff for this particular ship, it is really suited to PvP. I mentioned it several times already. With this buff, it gives you the same amount of versatility as a cruiser in the entry-level classes. And that is the thing about it. You have the same power as a cruiser, and you also have the edge on most cruisers because you can knock out their capacitors. And the only ships which are going to give you a problem in this class are any ship that has a massive capacitor or any faction class cruiser. So this ship definitely has the edge over frigates, destroyers, and standard cruisers. Faction cruisers are in another league all of their own when it comes to this vessel. Okay, as you look at the flight velocity, it isn't that fast. At 378 meters per second, if you count the ship as a tackle, you are really overdoing what you count as a tackle. The fact that it can give you a 32 kilometer radius on tackling means that you can use it in an optimal situation for tackling ships, but you can't use it as a permanent tackle. It also can be used to augment its own power, and with everything being higher in efficiency when it comes to Nosferatu, in PvE this ship is a beast. Okay, so 5 AU warp speed is not the fastest, 88 megawatt power grid output. Now this is one of the biggest power grid outputs, and this ship versus the defensive succubus in this class are one of the only ships that have a very heavy collision when it comes to their ability in fights. If you had to put the Cruor against the succubus, you might actually have a very good fight. It is a fight that can be won in the last second. It can go either way depending on the pilot in each ship. But the general side of benefit goes to the bloodsucker in the form of the Cruor. If the person using the succubus has the right fittings, they can survive the Cruor for a much greater period of time than I'm even able to express. So around 125, 30 is what our overall power grid is on this. The capacitor is 905 gigajoules, which is a massive capacitor. I'm not even going to talk about its extension. And its cargo capacity is 270 cubics, making it very small. A 138 scan radius means it's a very tiny scan radius. It will take quite long for any big ships to lock onto it. Okay, so let's look at it. Armor resistance is definitely its go-to for any stat. So we want to try and augment its armor if possible. If we can't augment its armor, we can obviously augment its shields. So we'll look through it and we will go through it. I'm actually going to argue it because I am going to go for a shield build over the armor build on this. Okay, so it has 3x3x3 in all of its main slots. So that's 3 weapons, 3 mid and 3 low. But it also has 3 engineering and 3 navigation. So let's go into the lasers. Now, one thing to be honest about, I haven't already made my decision on the lasers for this vessel. I've decided to work it out on a calculation as I'm doing it because I've been making these mistakes frequently again. 13 megawatts times 3, that's 39 megawatts. Looking at the overall output damage before buffing it up, we've got almost 65 per weapon. 65 times 3, 180 plus, right? 195 damage per hit. That's quite a good tick from the ship. It's good enough to smash away small vessels. And it's 4-second activation time. There is no reduction on this particular level, but if you add into the effect from all of your research into lasers, you most probably do have a reduction in activation time, giving you somewhere closer to a 2-second activation time on the weapon. 2.79, somewhere near there, so it's almost 3 seconds. Right, we have a 5.25 by 2.5 kilometer range. Basically that will give me just around 7.75 kilometers. Extended with all research, you get about an 11 kilometer range. This ship can be effective in up to a 32 kilometer range when you pair it up with the right mid slots. There are going to be 2 mid slot configurations for this PvE fit for the vessel. Remember, I'm not going for a PvP fit. The PvP fit is all depending on who you're going to fight. If you're fighting people in other vessels that are higher class than you, are better off going for a cruiser anytime, any day. If you are going to be fighting anybody in the same class as you, it's just pure frigate fights. Show up in a faction frigate, you're going to dominate everything. Okay, so let's look at the next part of it. So we already know that the pulses have a 10 kilometer radius, right? Let's go down to the beams. Now, beams are generally what most people will use with the ship because of its high stun radius. Remember, the fact that you can stop a ship means you can start applying damage while they're quite far out. Now, just bear with me, you'll understand everything as I go through it. Right, remember we have 39 megawatts reduced from the power grid if we use the first one. Here's 16 megawatts. If we take this off the power grid, there isn't going to be 39. This is going to take us up to 48 megawatts of the 88. That means 40 megawatts to put in mid and low slots. So yes, we have really pulled down that grid quite heavily. You will see what I mean about altering your grid to alter fittings, because when I touch on the grid fittings, is going to be before I touch my low slots. Now, there is a reason behind it, and you'll find out as I go through it in a minute. Okay, activation time is 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds it can fire. Its activation cost is 6.9 gigajoules. Now that does go down with research, so expect it to be closer to a 6 gigajoule cost per activation. 6 out of 900 is nothing. It's a fraction of what you're actually going to be using, so it's not really anything to stress about. Let's look at the next thing. Optimal range is 11 plus 2.5. Extending this will give you almost 20 kilometers. So a 20 kilometer laser range for firing, it still isn't at the maximum. If you're looking at the two differences between 15 and of 10 to 20, that's where you're staying in your optimal ranges. It does make some difference in combat, but I am going to opt with sticking with the beam lasers. Now, although this range seems like it is quite far extended, it isn't the maximum that it can be extended. And the reason why you want to keep these beams on you instead of going with pulses is this here has a easier targeting range, so it's going to be able to target a lot better. Your accuracy fall off maybe 2.5 kilometers off your total, but it does extend as well with your research. So you might get something like 4.5 kilometers extended range with a 15 kilometer range. So that means anything from 10 all the way up to 20 will be hit by your lasers. Okay. You could obviously change that up a little bit and go with the cheaper option that will leave you with more power grid in the end. It doesn't really make a massive difference to your ship. This is one of those ships where it's really hard to make a final decision. I'm really going to focus on staying with the pulses. Sorry, not the pulses, the beams. But I can see a reason for you to use the pulse. If you know you're fighting in close quarters, if you know it's not going to make a difference whether you get away or not, that is going to be a good idea. I'm actually leaving the mid slots first because it doesn't specifically say small Nosferatu. We're going into engineering rigs, and let's go into electronic rigs first, if I'm correct. No, those are scan rigs. My mistake. Engineering rigs. Right. So let's look at the various control rigs that we have. Now I've forgotten the names of each one, so I have to look at them directly. Capacitor, no, we don't need more capacitor on the ship. That's going to be stable. Recharge time, no, we don't even need more recharge time. This ship is, there's it. Auxiliary power grid, 15% boost. If you aren't using T4 rigs on the ship, you're wasting your time buying such an expensive ship. That is what I'm going to say. Even if it costs you 1 billion per rig, it is worth it on these ships. Because these ships are so far out of the league of anything else, it is good to go with that. Now, adding 15% to your ship may not sound like the biggest deal, but 15% to 130 is quite a big lump sum. It's going to pull you up to almost 140, right? If you double this, it's not going to give you double 15%. Oh no, wait, it doesn't have a penalty on it. So then you can just go with all three as power grid outputs, but I wouldn't go with all three power grid outputs. I'd only maximize it as 2, giving you a 30% boost to your power grid, which will be somewhere in the range of 36, 37. That's the amount of extra power you're going to get to your ship, pulling you up all the way to about 160 as your total power grid. And as you know, with the other method, we knocked off 48. So 48 out of 160 means you have 120 megawatts to deal with for the rest of your ship. If you decide to overclock one of your items, you have a much better shielding system or a much better armor system to help you defend against an attack. But we will be getting into it as we enter into the next round of fittings. Now the next thing to know is we're going to put on a navigation rig and auxiliary thruster. That is where I go for all of my fittings. Extra flight speed always helps you. So one auxiliary thruster and a double power grid extension. Obviously I'm going for something crazy for mid and low. So let's go looking at the electronic warfare. Okay, now I did say there are 2 options on the ship. Option number 1, you can go with the standard feeder style on this vessel. Remember, 1 Nosferatu is 1 3/4 Nosferatu's power. So you're going to be getting that much of a buff with them. You might as well double the output from a single Nosferatu. It won't really hurt you that badly. But if you really want to stay on top of your fight, there is a way to do it. I'll explain it in a second. So for PvE, you can double this, and as you can see, it's 61% adjustment at a total range of 14.8. Now that 14.8 will be doubled. Sorry, this isn't right. I thought it was 16 kilometers at the most. Okay, never mind, I'm making a mistake somewhere here. But anyway, doubling this is going to give you 29 kilometers. So that means if you're using those long range pulse lasers, like I said earlier, you've got 29.6, right? That's almost 30 kilometers on that beam. 30 kilometers to stop a ship and shoot them. That's how the predators are going to work. Alright, let's go down. Scramblers make no difference for this vessel. You don't want to use it. Disruptors aren't going to do anything for you. Oh no, wait, there's nothing here. I'm in the wrong place. Alright. Now here comes the crown of it, right? If you were going with the double Weber fire, you have that massive stopping power at up to 30 kilometers basically. I'm not going to say 29.6 because that's 30 kilometers when you round it up. So let's look at the small Falcrus Freycolas, right? It's a 9 megawatt power grid output, 39 megawatts. Remember, you're increasing it by 75%. It does give you quite a bit. You're going to go up all the way to just over 60 gigajoules per second drain. Not per second, sorry, every 4 seconds on the drain. So thinking about that, even with a nice recharge in terms of shield regen, this ship will do really well. So yeah, that is one option. You can double this up, or if you went with the double Weber fire, jump into medium, right? Let's look at this one here as our entry level. 79 megawatts, massive hit to your power grid. You're going to cripple that remaining 120 all the way down to 40 megawatts for the rest of your ship. That's if you're going with this particular build. And look at that, you start off with 70 gigajoules. You're going to be through the roof on how high this ship can actually pull energy from your enemies, right? There is one thing about it, if you go up one more, the power grid usage gets a little bit heavier. 74, wait, I'm double checking this. Am I making a mistake? No, I'm not. It's actually lower. Okay. Oh no, the power grid is much heavier. Sorry, I did make that mistake. Yeah, 79. So 79 is fine. It's perfectly balanced for you to take it onto the ship. You have 40 megawatts to put in your low slots. Your low slots are going to be a little bit expensive on the ship. Remember, we've extended the grid a lot. We've already passed 120 megawatts, so your standard grid is complete. That's with the extension of all your engineering. 120 megawatts is a massive draw. All that you are now counting on is a 30% buff from 120, which isn't really all that big. 120 by 30 would give me, let's see, yeah, as I said, about 36. 130 would be a little bit more, 39, right? So I'm just counting it as those figures. So looking at it, we're sitting at around 169 is the total grid. We counted out the 1 megawatt into the weapons. So we took out 40, that left us at 120. And we took out 1 for the sake of the Weber fire, right? So all of that was accounted, and we still had 120 megawatts. Then you add in this massive knock to the system, and we're left with 40 megawatts to do a low slot build. Now obviously that's if you go with the heavy boost, but if you don't go with the heavy boost, you can just go double Falcrus, right? You're getting all of that pull, right? And you just extending the number of slots you're using. Your number of megawatts used on the grid is 18, right? But you're only using 1 Weber fire. It does make your enemy slow down a lot more, and this is where the difference comes in. Remember, we're going to be playing with 40 megawatts to do this entire shielding of the ship. So here's what we're going to do. This is one which is the only one from this class that I'm actually going to go with a hardener on the vessel. Repairers are 13 megawatts. If I go with this one here, it's not that heavy, it's not that bad. 13 megawatts isn't going to kill me, especially if I have the big one. Look at it, I repair 190 every 6 seconds. 38 gigajoules cost for activation. I'm recovering this every single time it's activating double over. So I could double up small regen if I wanted, and that will give me 380 megawatts of regen on the armor. That's quite a bit of armor. It's quite a good place to put in a lot of power. But let's look up one more class, and I already know it's not possible, but let's nonetheless look at it from the lowest level. Armor mod in the factions, 90 megawatts. If we went with this, we can't pair it up with the ship's current systems. If we went with the double small Falcrus, we can pair this up because we only reduced 18 and we now left with 12 megawatts to do everything else on the ship. 12 megawatts to put whatever else we're going to place onto the vessel. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it does give us a little bit of an edge. We don't really need to accelerate crazy amounts. We have a lot of stopping power. We have a stopping, one piece of stopping power. We have the full ability of the Nosferatu to regain our energy, and 129 gigajoules activation cost is covered by our Nosferatu. So all of this is balanced out with our entire initial assault. So that is one of the reasons why it can be used in that particular format. However, I am going to change this up. The last thing which goes on the ship is always going to be in the form of some type of acceleration, and I'll always go with Afterburner for PvE. Right, and I'll show you where you want to go. You want to go B type, and looking at this cost, it's 16 megawatts. So you realize there was a problem. If we went with the large armor regen, we lose this advantage. If we went with double armor regen, we lose this advantage, right? Actually, we don't lose this advantage. We keep that advantage. We just lose the ability to harden the armor. And looking at it overall, it's 16 megawatts. We can keep this on non-stop because it's only 25 gigajoule raw, plus the recharge from the shield. Nowhere near what we need to even worry about. We're pulling in far more from the Nosferatu, even at the small radius. So yeah, there we go. We're actually sitting quite well with where we're going to sit. If you were going for the large armor wrapper, you can always use the large armor wrapper with the small lasers. You have a total of 9 extra megawatts. When this goes on, you still have 3 megawatts, and in that spot you can always slot in a quick and easy little armor, what is that called? Armor hardener. Obviously we're not going to go with reactive, we're going to go with adaptive, and that will give you such a massive boost. Obviously it changes a lot of what you're doing with this vessel, so be very careful about making these swaps. They do make a big difference to your overall performance. Right, you saw that. I've shown you the basics of where the ship really is going to shine. But now let's look at what could happen if I put a shield booster on the ship. I'm not even going to look at small, right? Skip small straight away. Go to opened again. Go to medium and go to B class, right? We're not even messing around with the ship at this point. 58 megawatts. We're through the roof already. We have way more boost in terms of how much of regen we're taking on. We're taking 384 megawatts, right? With this, we can boost it up a second piece to make the ship even more difficult to hit if we want to. The 384 is taking it through the roof. As you can see, this is medium B-type shield booster. Nobody is really going to penetrate you at 384 considering your speed. You have your afterburner to give you extra speed. You're reducing the intake of damage by massive figures. Only 1 or 2 ships could actually output that type of DPS against you, and that's if they manage to slow you enough. If you're draining them, they're not going to have those advantages against you because you're draining at quite a good rate. You're draining at around a figure of, let's see, with the double smalls on board your ship, if you aren't counting in the boost, you're draining at just near 80 megawatts. And once you add in the boost of 75%, you're draining closer to 120 megawatts again. No, that's 50% boost. 135, I think. Yeah, it should be about 135, 132, somewhere in that range. But that's quite a big boost for draining off a ship. Most of the big ships only recover 132 a minute. So you literally have the edge over them. Your drain is so hard on those vessels that you can actually cripple their systems because they still have the draw of recovering shield. They still have the draw of activations of afterburners or micro warp drives. And all of this is something that really gives you the edge. You're going to be drawing that much of power out of them. Obviously, you can't cripple PvE vessels, but this is a good way to keep your ship running a little bit longer in the fight. So you can use this ship quite well, and you can push possibly T9, T10. That is where the Cruor goes in terms of power. You're obviously going to go with the shield hardener again. Adaptive, maximum level B because it is 1 megawatt. Their charge is so light that you're not really going to take much of a knock to it. this impacts the ship in a big way. You don't have the largest amount of extra armor, but you have extended your ability with the vessel. Obviously, if you change your weapons around, I would suggest you going with the medium armor wrap, the armor hardener, and the afterburner. The afterburner will stay small. You don't want to overburden it in terms of its acceleration cost, because the bigger afterburner would definitely give you a lot more speed, but you'd also lose all of your ability to track and fire when it comes to the speed of the vessel. You'll be wasting all of your effective power. Okay, so that's about it for those rigs. But there is one more set of rigs that weren't discussed when it comes to weapon rigs. Now here goes. You're going to extend damage, you're going to increase firing time, and then on top of that you're going to obviously augment the firing time a second time with double damage. So double damage and one firing time upgrade, that's going to make the ship one of the best for its class. It's going to decimate everything on the battlefield. I hope that you all do enjoy the video, and I hope to catch you all out there busy massacring people with the Cruor. So see you all then. Have a good day.